With us now to unveil this week's new issue of Time magazine, Time's managing editor, Richard Stengel. Rick, what are we looking at this week?
Well, we're looking at a subject that is bothering millions and millions of Americans, 70 million Americans to be exact. It is the problem of 401ks and why we need to retire the 401k and why it's not working for millions of Americans. The 401k, as not many people realize, was originally created by Congress as a tax dodge for executives 30 years ago. It was never meant to be the primary vehicle of retirement for Americans, and over the last 20 years, it has become so. And what we've seen over the last 5 years is, you know, if you had $100,000 in your 401k 5 years ago and you had the standard alignment of investments, you'd have less than that now. And what's been a disaster for people with the going into the Great Recession and now coming out of it is that the way the 401k works is that the closer you are to retirement, the less choice you have and the more money you're likely to lose. So people who are retiring were going into their retirement with hardly anything in their 401k.
So, and we hear time and time again, people having to work past retirement age, past 65, or some even working into their 70s because their life savings were blown over the past couple of years on 401k.
Right, and in fact, there's a quirk in the 401k, which is the closer you are to retirement, the more likely you are to lose money if the stock market goes down because you're putting less money into it. So that's what happened to a lot of people. So we talked to dozens and dozens of people who, you know, who have retired but now have to work. And you know, originally the 401k was meant to be a supplement to the kind of retirement that you would have, pension plus Social Security. But as so many companies have gotten rid of their pensions, people have depended on the 401k and they've lost out.
So what's the plan?
I mean, I've been talking to your guys back here while I was waiting to go on, and they asked me what the cover was, and they said, yeah, tell me about it. You know, I've lost all, I don't even look at my 401k anymore.
Yeah. So what do we do instead?
Well, what we propose instead, and that story is by a young business writer of ours named Steve Gandel, is a insurance pension plan, where instead of paying that money into a 401k, 6% of your salary every week or month, you pay it into an insurance plan that guarantees you a pension, basically, for the rest of your life at about a quarter of your salary.
And that seems fair. I mean, the problem with the people who have lost all their money in their 401ks is 401k, isn't it supposed to be what you have when you retire? Why would you put money, 6% of your salary, into something that is a risk?
Well, it's a risk, and then it's also something where you deplete it. I mean, it's basically a bunch of cash that you have when you retire, and you're supposed to take out 4 or 5% a year. I mean,
and everyone
depends on how you.
It's the smart thing to do.
It was for a long
There's
time.
a whole business. I'm not sure it was. I mean, it's not even 30 years old, right? So you have a whole class of people who have grown up, these investment advisors who take this thing and are telling you to do something that nobody has tested or not. It's like a vaccine that they haven't really tested, and they don't know what the long-term influence is.
But in fairness, there was an assumption that because you allowed wealthier executives to do it, that would mean that it would be a good thing for
But remember,
class.
it was meant
I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying, but at the time, because we had that plan in Congress, as Joe remembers, and it was widely encouraged that you take advantage of this, and we encouraged our constituents for that reason.
But it was for executives who were trying to shield some of their income from regular tax in real time so that they could put it away where it wasn't going to be taxed. It was, you know, workers weren't even eligible for it when it first.
The effects of the current economic crisis have touched everyone. Even if you still have a good job and a paid-up mortgage, chances are your monthly 401k statement will remind you that you've lost a good chunk of your savings. Trillions of dollars have evaporated from those accounts that have been...
There clearly has been a raid on these funds by the people of Wall Street, and it's cost the savers and the future retirees a lot of money that would otherwise be in their account, independent of the financial collapse.
Representative George Miller of California is chairman of the House Committee on Education and Labor and a staunch critic of the 401k industry, especially its practice of deducting more than a dozen undisclosed fees from its clients' 401k accounts.
Now you got a bunch of economic wizards jumping in and taking money out of your retirement plan, and they don't want to tell you how much. You can't decipher it in simple English, and they're not interested in disclosing it or having any transparency about it.
And most of the people that look at their 401ks have no idea that these fees are being taken out.
No. Where would you find it? Where would you find these fees in this prospectus? You can look on any page you want, and when you're all done reading it, and you will find some of the fees and the commissions here, but you won't find them all, and I bet you won't find half of them.
There are legal fees, trustee fees, transactional fees, stewardship fees, bookkeeping fees, finder's fees, and the list goes on and on. Miller's committee has heard testimony that they can eat up half the income in some 401k plans over a 30-year span, but he has not been able to stop it.
We tried to just put in some disclosure and transparency in these fees, and we felt the full fury of that financial lobbying.
David Ray, a lobbyist for the 401k industry, says he favors disclosing the fees, but his partners in the financial industry don't.
You think most people know these fees exist?
I think they know that there are fees. They don't know exactly how large they are.
Why do you think the financial services industry is opposed to fee transparency?
I don't know that they're opposed to it. I think the issue is...
You don't think they're opposed to it?
Well, they want to keep...
You're a lobbyist in Washington, right? You know they're opposed to it. George Miller hasn't been able to get a bill to the floor.
I think they want to keep the systems as simple and not make changes. They like the way things are, and whenever you push people out of their comfort zones, you know, it's an issue.
I mean, they're comfortable with the situation because they're making a ton of money, or they have made.
When the stock market plunges like it did this past week, everyone pays attention. But short-term losses aren't that important to the man you're about to meet. David Walker thinks the biggest economic peril facing the nation is being ignored. And for this past year, he's been traveling the country like an Old Testament prophet, urging people to wake up before it's too late. Who is David Walker, and why should we care? He's the nation's top accountant, the Comptroller General of the United States. He's totaled up the government's income, liabilities, and future obligations, and concluded that our current standard of living is unsustainable unless some drastic action is taken, and he's not alone. It's been called the dirty little secret everyone in Washington knows, a set of financial truths so inconvenient that most elected officials don't even want to talk about them, which is exactly why David Walker does. Walker says you could eliminate all waste and fraud and the entire Pentagon budget, and the long-range financial projections barely change in what's shaping up as an actuarial nightmare.
There's not going to be enough wage earners to pay for the benefits of the baby boomers.
That's part of the problem. But the real problem, Steve, is health care cost. Our health care problem is much more significant than Social Security.
What do you mean by that?
By that I mean that the Medicare problem is 5 times greater than the Social Security problem. We'd have to have $8 trillion today invested at Treasury rates to deliver on that promise.
And how much do we have?
Zip.
So where's that money going to come from?
Well, it's going to come from additional taxes.